I was looking back on my year so far in reading, and I thought that I would do a mid-year reading update. So January to June, we are going to take a deep dive into what I've liked, what I haven't liked, what I've loved, what surprised me. We're going to go through it all. If you're new here, my name is Gabrielle and I do bookish and lifestyle content here on YouTube, TikTok and Instagram, and I'm also an aspiring author. I thought we would get into all the different stats, so grab yourself a drink and let's chat books. I thought we could do a little deep dive into my Fables stats. So here is my year so far. Ignore July, I have already read 2 books this month. But as you can see, I've had varying levels of success throughout the months. April was definitely my slowest month. I feel like I just had loads on. But you can see June, last month, I have really been amping it up. I have been binge reading recently for the past month and I'm having a great time. So yes, June was my month and we're gonna go into why that was. I also thought we could go into what genres I've been reading. Romance, of course, is taking the cake with the vast majority. Of course, fantasy. We love fantasy romance in particular. I've read 8 young adult books. I'm trying to think about what they were. I am a fan of a young adult fantasy romance. Fiction, 1 book. I don't know how that makes sense because almost all of them will be fiction. And psychology, 1 book, which I know exactly what that was. I always think it's really interesting looking at your stats in such a way, and I'm clearly having a good year. Well, I feel like I'm having a good year so far anyway. I've split everything up into categories, so we're going to have the book that has won the category, and we're also going to have some honourable mentions. And the first category is my fave book of the year. And I'm not going to lie, it took me literally 10 seconds to think of what my favourite book of the year was, and you're not even going to be surprised. Of course, it had to be The Night and the Moth. I will not shut up about this book. I am obsessed. Literally obsessed with this book. It's just perfection. I don't even know how to describe this book. I believe that you should go into every book blind, like just know the basic tropes and just go into it. If you haven't read this yet, you absolutely need to. You need to read this like straight away. If you loved the Shepherd King duology and you loved Once Upon a Broken Heart, I think that you would really enjoy this book. And the best part about it is it's part of a duet or duology. We still can't get that right. So there's another one to come and I cannot wait for it. And now onto the honourable mentions. The first one, actually, when I looked back on it, I didn't really think about this being one of my favourite reads, but when I think about it, it genuinely was. And it was Amid Clouds and Bones. This book in general was just like everything that I could want in a fantasy romance. It had enemies to lovers, we had tension, we had conflict, we had everything. Literally everything, and it took me by surprise a lot of the plot twists that happened throughout it. It's also a standalone, which is almost unheard of for there to be like a really good gripping fantasy romance. I think the only thing I didn't like about this book was that I felt like the battle scene could have went on for a wee bit longer, but other than that, like, literal perfection. Everything else was amazing. The tension was perfect between the characters. I don't want to go too much into this because I went into this blind as usual, and I'm so glad I did because I was shook at all the plot twists that happened in this, and honestly, bravo. Another honourable mention is A Fate Forged in Fire. This is kind of almost in line for top spot, but it just was slightly below A Night in the Moth. But honestly, everything that you could want in a book. This is a dragon romantasy. We have a strong, badass FMC. We have enemies to lovers. And we have Scottish Celtic mythology, which I thoroughly enjoyed. There was literally not a single thing that I didn't like about this book. Everyone knows that I'm a sucker for an absolute insane, confident FMC. Like an FMC that I could only wish to aspire to be. And this just gave everything. The banter in this made me giggle, and it also made me like so happy, but also the politics and everything I found very easy to understand, and just everything. It's on par to be one of my top series, and this is only the first book. Could you imagine what I'm going to be like when the second book comes out? I can't even imagine. With the ending that we were left on, I am absolutely dying to read book 2. Perfect. Now we're going on to the best sequel that I've read. And this was honestly a tricky one because I obviously read a lot of sequels. I read a lot of series, but the absolute best sequel that I've read this year has been The Rebel Witch. I read The Crimson Moth last year and it actually became one of my top favourite books that I read last year. We had this cat and mouse dynamic between the two main characters, and I was so happy that after the ending from the first book, we still got a lot of that vibe in the second book, but we didn't dawdle. I think because it's a duology and there's only two, we didn't dawdle with the plot thickening, with the plot coming together, and I felt that a lot of the plot that was built up in the first book properly came to fruition in the second book. And the romance, I'm just so happy with how it turned out. I'm not going to go too much into it as usual because it is a sequel, and if you haven't read The Crimson Moth, I absolutely beg you to do so. This is probably one of my top duologies that I've ever read. And we have 2 honourable mentions in this category, and I think you're going to be surprised. It is actually Nightbane. Lightlark and Nightbane were the first 2 books that I read in 2025, so it was a new series to me. And Lightlark was good, but this sequel was utter perfection. I already knew going into the series that this is people's favourite one of the series, and I 100% know why. It literally features everything that I love in it. If you didn't know, I love flashback snippets, specifically within a certain trope. I'm not going to say what, but this gave me everything that I wanted. The whole back and forth, and then present, past. Yes, it's everything that I love in a book. If you haven't read the Lightlark series yet, then I definitely would recommend at least reading the first 2 books. I can't speak to the third book, but for a YA fantasy romance series, it's very well done. And the next honourable mention that we have is God of Fury. Again, another series that I started this year. This is part of the Legacy of God series, and I believe it's book 4. I'm wrong, it's book 5. And this is the first dedicated romance that I have read, and I devoured every bit of it. Before this one, God of Wrath was my favourite, but honestly, Bran and Nico, the romance in this, amazing. The plot, fine. But the romance, the breaking of boundaries, it's a dark romance, what can we expect? I literally could not put it down, and this is like a reasonably sized book, but I could not put this thing down, and honestly, I think about this book all the time. I could literally do a reread of this book because I thought it was so good. If you are a fan of dark romance, I definitely recommend the Legacy of God series. The rest of the books are incredible, but this one has been my ultimate favourite. The next category is my biggest surprise. So I've got 2 books for this. The first one is from when I was in a bit of a dragon romance mood, and I was on the hunt for something that was going to settle my cravings. So we have A Fire in the Sky by Sophie Jordan. I had never read anything by Sophie Jordan before, so I really wasn't sure what to think, and I wasn't sure how I was going to feel. It's reasonably short, but I do believe it's the first in a series. But I ended up having a great time. This is a marriage of convenience fantasy romance with dragon elements. We don't get a lot of dragon elements in this book. However, they are there and I can see them coming later on. But why was I obsessed with this romance? The era that we were set in was kind of giving similar vibes to the TV show Reign, if anyone has seen that. It was that kind of court setup, and there was a lot of politics, and we have this yummy warlord man who is going to be the husband of our FMC, but they're obviously enemies. When I was going through all the books that I've read this year, this one kept on catching my eye, and I was like, do you know what? I had a thoroughly great time with that, and I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. So for that reason, this is one of my biggest surprises. As a girl who loves a dragon fantasy romance and a marriage of convenience, I'm obsessed. Another book that ended up being a huge surprise to me was Insatiable by Lee Rivers. This is one of the more recent ones that I've read, and it is a dark romance. I was not expecting to like it as much as I did, but I devoured this book. I didn't only devour this book, I devoured every book in the series. the way I was expecting to be freaked out by this book, but I actually binged it so quick. I think I read this within a day. Please check your trigger warnings if you're considering going into these books. They are not for the faint of heart, which I thought I was a faint of heart. But I was thinking that if I saw this book as a film, I don't think I could watch it, but reading it, I'm kind of almost detached from a lot of the things that are happening, so I feel like it's fine for me to read it. That might give you a bit of an insight into how dark it is. I still don't even know if this is the darkest romance that I could read. Before this, I had read Rena Kent, and honestly, Rena Kent is nowhere near as dark as this. So please bear that in mind. The true surprise was the fact that I loved it. I love Cade Mitchell, and I wasn't sure how we were going to get 3 books based off the same couple, but these people go through it and they deserve all the 3 books that they got. The next category we're going to go into is my biggest disappointment. And I begrudge saying this because I don't like to slander books. However, I need to be honest and just go through my biggest disappointments of the year. So I've got 2. The first one being Close Protection. I found this book pretty slow. There wasn't a lot of the conflict that I would have expected to be in a bodyguard romance. And also because it was YA, I don't think that we got the reward for going through the plot, which of course it's YA. If you like a YA contemporary romance, then you'll probably like this, but I'm just not into YA contemporary romances. I need like an extra element of something. That's why I mostly, if I'm going to read YA, I'll read fantasy. But the dynamic between the 2 characters, there was just some things that I didn't like. I understand that our FMC is a rich heiress type and our MMC was not that way inclined. There was almost like this pressure for him to have money to be able to look after her, and I'm just not about that vibe. And there was also a plot point at the end which literally came out of the blue and it just solved all the problems at the end. But yeah, I think I was just expecting a different vibe from this because all the other bodyguard romances that I've read have literally hit me. Like, I love bodyguard romances, so I think I just went in with like completely different expectations to what this book gave me in the end. The next book that I would probably put in my disappointment category is Wings So Wicked. Again, this is one of the first books that I read at the beginning of the year, and I was just expecting so much more to the romance, and I found the plot quite predictable. Honestly, I would have been fine if these 2 characters just remained friends. Like, I didn't really feel the whole romantic connection between the 2. I believe it's part of a duology, or at least a series, but I've had literally no inclination to pick up any of the other books. And I feel bad for that because in theory, this book literally had everything that I wanted in it, with winged males, like fighting academy, forced proximity, him healing her. Literally everything about the book screamed, Gabrielle, you're going to enjoy this, but I didn't love it. I didn't love it. The next category I actually found quite difficult, and it's books that made me happy. And honestly, happy in general is not how I feel when I finish a lot of books. Maybe that screams the kind of books that I like. I like inner turmoil and devastation, that kind of emotion. But let me go through some of the books that genuinely did make me happy. And a lot of these are actually contemporary romances, which I feel can be a lot lighter with their subjects. So the first one, which I'm going to say is the top one here, was Lights Out. Again, I know this is a dark romance, but this was actually so funny. I literally was sitting giggling to myself at the banter between the 2 main characters. And not even the banter, the inner monologue of the MMC was hilarious. A lot of people say that the audiobook for this is elite, and I can totally see why, depending on the voice actor that's used, because honestly a lot of it is so comedic. Like, the guy is dark, but he's so goofy at the same time, and it just made me sit and smile for a lot of it, despite what was actually happening in the plot. And although a lot of the themes are quite dark, their love was actually so fluffy and cute. And I don't know, just even now I'm sitting smiling thinking about it. So yeah, that is definitely one of the top books that made me happy. And now on to honourable mentions. It has to be a cowboy romance. So we have Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage. This is the last book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. I started off this series not like that obsessed with the books, but as it went on, I became slowly more invested in all the character stories, and this one was by far my favourite. Again, as I've said before, this book had flashbacks in it because it is a second chance romance, so you got flashbacks to when they were together the first time and the contrast between them now, and I love that in a book. It is like love that like transcends time, like despite the fact that they've been apart for so long, like they just can't stay away from each other. And it just genuinely made me so happy. The MMC in this I loved. He was called Dusty, and he was just so cute. He was just so in love with her, and it just made me smile. So this is a genuine epic honourable mention for books that made me happy. Another honourable mention is Seeing Red. This is the second book in the Wells Ranch series. Again, another cowboy romance. And this is pregnancy trope, but it is literally the only pregnancy trope book that I have read where we got all the way through the pregnancy and everything that they went through. So the characters have known each other for like a long time, and the only reason they got together at the start was to try and make someone jealous. And there's so many elements of this, like they both really deserve to be happy and be with each other, and the way they get there is just lovely. And I'm not usually a pregnancy trope gal, but this one really just struck a chord in my heart and I'll never forget it. Honestly, love this book. Then we've got in the next category, new to me authors. And I had to go for the queens themselves. We have Lee Rivers and Rena Kent. Both dark romance authors, but both so different. Rena Kent, obviously, with the Legacy of God series, which honestly changed the game for me. I was never a dark romance girly, and then I was like, oh, I'll just dip my toes into dark romance and see what the hype is about with this series, and I am so glad that I did that because I will never look back. Dark romance has automatically just shot up to one of my top favourite genres now, and you can thank Rena Kent for that. Also, Lee Rivers. I did not know that Lee Rivers was Scottish, but the whole West of Scotland elements that are throughout all of her books, I think I've read all of her dark romance backlist at this point, and she's now doing a fantasy romance series, and I absolutely will be picking that up. Her writing is just so bingeable, you just can't put it down. You're just so invested in what's happening, and honestly I'm so glad that I found her. Again, I'm never looking back. Dark romance is the one, and now that we're getting a little dark fantasy romance from her, I'm invested. You're giving me everything that I want, Lee Rivers. Everything. I was going to go into books that are on my TBR for the next half of the year, but I think I'm going to save that for another video because I feel like we've went through a lot of books in this video. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and comment, and I will see you in the next one.